Scott Hamilton, welcome to the Mindset of Vantage podcast. Man, I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I know you're a busy guy. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show.
Today is perfect. Absolutely perfect. I've only got 600 things on my to-do list today, and I'm getting yelled at constantly. My phone blew up starting at 7:40 this morning with and it's like, okay, all right. No, we're good. It's a crazy time of year, but I mean, when I got your invitation, it's like, yeah, this is perfect. And anything I can do to encourage, anything I can do to use whatever I've experienced to help the next person through it. And, so much about everything in this life is truly mindset. I was just looking at a reel from Jordan Rubin, who did ancient nutrition and, the maker's diet and all that. I've met him on several occasions, and I'm a big fan of ancient nutrition. But mindset, mindset is everything. He's talking about people going through cancer, and if they allow the fear and just, oh, I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die, they allow that to root itself. It probably will, create things that don't need to be there. Where if you have the mindset of, I'm going to survive, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to win this battle, then that gives you a much better chance of A, enjoying the time you have, and B, probably seeing yourself through it. When I went through my cancer, my whole thing was, I want to be on tour next year. I just want to be so back on tour next year. And it was a journey. It was a really interesting, challenging, at times, kind of brutal, but again, but it was all just sort of part of the strengthening process to allow me to see just how strong I am, how much stronger I am than I thought I was, and how getting back on tour the next year was the perfect mindset. No one was allowed in my room unless they made me laugh, all those things, So yeah, I mean, it really is perspective. It really is taking where you are and what you have and just sort of putting them in an order where you feel like today's a day that I can totally live joyfully, productively, and gratefully.
You have one of the most inspiring stories that I've ever heard, and
Oh, wow.
it
Thank you.
starts really early on. And I think for the listeners to truly understand you at a deep level, Scott, we need to peel back the curtains on what your childhood was like. So, can you take us back in the day and paint us a picture for some of the challenges that you had going early in your life?
Well, I mean, I was adopted, which, I didn't really know until I was a little bit older, maybe 3 or 4. My parents would always tell me how special I was because they chose me, and how loved I was, and how, they really wanted me. And, so they really made the adoption. They didn't want it to be one of those weird things. They wanted me to grow up with it so that I always felt like I wasn't abandoned, or I wasn't unwanted or unintended or inconvenient or all the negatives. They wanted it to be where there was, I was brought into the world, my birth mother saw it through, and I was given a chance to be in a family that was going to unconditionally love me and sacrifice everything for. So that's kind of that's fundamental, that's foundational, right? So as I was growing up, I had a big personality. I was very hyperactive. I was everywhere. I loved to be on the roof when I was 3, running back and forth. My parents were freaking out. I would build little forts in that cabinet that's above your refrigerator that you don't use because it's impossible to get
Of
to.
course.
I built a fort in there, and they couldn't find me one day, and they're freaking out. And I just opened the door and I go, "What's wrong?" And they're like, "What is there?" So there was a lid on my crib because I climb out and I get into mischief. So I really have great memories of, my early childhood. And then I stopped growing and I stopped developing. And I spent 4 years in the hospital, uh, different hospitals. I started in my hometown, and then I went to a bigger hospital in Toledo. I started in Bowling Green, Ohio. Then I went to Toledo, Ohio. Then I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Then I went to Boston Children's. And they could never diagnose what my issue was, but it was something that was preventing me from growing because I'd stopped. And I looked like, even though I love to eat, and even though I looked like I was a starving child because I had a distended stomach and I had no muscle development. And so finally we went to see a doctor that I had every symptom of a disease that he basically found. It's a celiac disease. And I always joke that, the disease they thought I had was Schwachman-Diamond syndrome. And Dr. Schwachman was my doctor. So like, he was the first celebrity I ever met, so there's that. But I was there in and out for about a year. And he couldn't prove that I had Schwachman. I had all the symptoms, but he couldn't prove that I had the disease. So he sent us home and said, live a normal life. And in that, our family physician who lived, like across the street, 3 doors down, just said, to my parents, you need a morning just to be, because you're exhausted. You're physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, in every way, you're exhausted from this 4-year journey with no answer. And so he said, I wouldn't recommend you take a morning off if I didn't have a plan, right? So that, any intervention has to have the next steps. Otherwise, it's just getting yelled at, right? So there was a brand new skating rink at Bowling Green State University where my dad was a professor. And they taught children how to skate every Saturday from 8 in the morning until noon. And so I started going to the rink. And it was soon that I realized that I really liked it. And it was soon that I realized I could skate as well kids. And it was soon that I realized I could skate as well as the best athletes in my grade. And for the first time ever, I kind of had like peer sort of self-esteem. Like I always felt like I was always the smallest. I was always the weakest. I was always the sickest. I was always, kind of the last one chose, kind of those things. I mean, remember, I still had friends I was liked, all those things, but I spent a lot more time with sick kids, back in those days than probably well kids. And so now I can skate as well or better than most of the best athletes in my grade. And I was like, wow, I have an identity now. And I just wanted to do only that. Right. So I turned into a rink rat. My mom got involved in the skating club. She would run all the, the tests, because in skating you test to advance in your, competitive world. And just it's all feedback, these tests. And so she was the test chairman, and she was really great at hospitality. So she would find out what was, the best judges, what was their like favorite food and drink, and she would just supply it. So they always wanted to come to Bowling Green for the test sessions. And so it was really cool. And then my dad he loved to build things. So he would do all the props for the ice shows, and he would just build stuff. And he loved that. It was his favorite thing. Like he'd teach all day. He was a biology professor at the university. And then afterwards he'd come home and eat, and then he'd go work on props for a few hours. And I'd get to go and I'd help build things and paint things and sand things. So I got to help my dad out and all of that. And that was really fun. So, growing up, it was unusual in a way, but I think all of our identities and all of our experiences growing up are unique. So I'm not going to say that mine was more, it was just different, and I was just back in my hometown, and it was really remarkable that even though I never went to Bowling Green State University, I grew up there. I started skating in that arena. I did show after show after show after competition, test in that rink. And they just inducted me last week into the Bowling Green State University Athletic Hall of Fame.
Oh, congratulations, Scott. That's awesome,
Yeah,
man.
it was because the Hall of Fame was in the lobby of the rink. And you'd see all these headshots with the years they went, years they were inducted. And I would walk up and down the lobby just looking at all these faces and all these names. And I think in that you just fantasize that, maybe someday, but I'm probably not going to go to the university. But then I looked at the criteria when they said I went to an Eddie George kind of event, in Nashville, because he's the new head coach of the football team. And that's when the athletic director told me that I was being inducted. And I was like, I don't want to rain on your parade or anything, but I never went to school there, right? And he said, it's not in the criteria. It's like, what? And so I went and looked, and it was not in the criteria. You didn't have to go to school there to be in there So it was, it was a remarkable night, and it was really surreal. And I just felt, my parents are both gone, but I just felt their presence. I just felt like somehow, this is something that is a shared thing. It wasn't just me, and my wife and youngest son were there, and it was really fun for them to meet a lot of the people that I grew up with, and just to meet some of the great athletes that went to the school. And it was just a great night. But it's just, it's kind of goes back to, you just stay alive long enough and good things happen. Just kind of stick around. If you stay in the game, if you just stay in the game, eventually great things happen. So that was a fun night.
We have a lot of sports parents that tune in, Scott. I'd love to hear. It sounds like you had a great set of parents that were supportive, and you probably learned from some in your ice skating field that weren't very supportive, and probably saw another side of the train tracks, if you will. I'd be curious to know, knowing what you know now, being a parent, and then seeing some other parents in the sports industry. What's a piece of advice that you'd love specifically sports parents to hear who have a, I don't know, 9, 10, 11-year-old who are maybe they're trying to find their identity or maybe they have found it, but is there a piece of advice you wish more sports parents knew?
Yeah, I do. I think our jobs as sports parents are to pay the bills, be the equipment manager, get to practice on time, take them to the events and be massively supportive. If they want feedback, give it to them, but be kind. And it's not yours, it's theirs, right? So my dad was, ROTC, lieutenant, never took a drink in college, got his PhD as young as you can get a PhD. He was in academia. And his son strapped knives to his feet and wore spandex. It's like, we don't have a choice. So as much as maybe his favorite sport at the time was basketball, there was no way in the world I was going to play basketball. I was the shortest kid in my class. And then the rink opened, then he started falling in love with, the hockey program. And I played youth hockey for a couple of years, but I was way too small. I just actually got on the phone the other day with the guy that ended my hockey career. And he goes, "I don't want to be known for that." And I go, "Well, sorry."
Too bad.
I was in the corner and I had no business being in the corner. And I saw that look in his eye. I go, "Oh, I'm going to get hit hard right now." And I just kind of let it happen. And I felt a pop in my neck. And for the next couple of weeks, I was in a cervical collar. Yeah, so, it's just hockey wasn't going to be my thing. But the skating thing, you kind of learned to enjoy it. My mom really learned to enjoy it. She was she was a second grade school teacher when I started skating. And then because of the bills and everything, she went back to school, got her master's, and then became an associate professor at the university in the home economics department, teaching marriage and family relations. So she understood the dynamic. But I see so many parents getting caught up because, well, I was a football player, so I want my son to be a football player. Well, if they choose that, I mean, you introduce it to them, introduce them to everything. And if they choose it, yeah, I mean, great. That'd be awesome. Then you have a wealth of knowledge that you can share if they ask, if they ask, if they ask. And then you can allow them to kind of grow in their sports. My youngest decided to play hockey, and we had a blast, on these travel teams. And he just charmed his way onto a bunch of teams they had no business being on. But he learned how to be a great skater and a great teammate. And he was really valuable in the locker room. He was really valuable to the coach because we didn't complain. If he was on the third line, it was the last team he played on. He was on the third line because the coach knew he wouldn't complain. So it's this is his activity. If that's going to be, his experience, then great. So we had fun doing it. And then when he was done, he was done. He just got to the end of a season one year and he goes, "I think I've had enough." And I said, "Great." So his older brother decided as I guess a junior in high school that he wanted to build his body up and be a MMA fighter. And so he started getting into all of that. And so jujitsu is every day, and he's got, striking, and he goes back and forth to work with a coach at Wildcard in LA. And, he's sparring with all these, boxers, and he's learning how to, fight. And my wife, she's like, "I know it says an identity. I know it's what he's supposed to be doing. I just don't want to see my son get beat up." But she's still massively supportive. We watch every UFC pay-per-view. He's on, he's watching videos. He's all in. He's been all in for the last, I guess, 6 years of just learning, growing, learning, growing, learning, growing. And he's going to have his MMA debut in November. He had a fight November 1st, but his opponent found his Instagram and saw what he does and what he posts, and he pulled out. Right? So I guess that's a good sign. I don't know, but we go to all the jiu-jitsu tournaments. So my younger son, when he quit hockey, he got into jiu-jitsu, and he loves it. He's having a blast, and they have a shared passion. And then, my younger son is into, he's really into building his mind, and he's reading all the time, and he's learning and he's growing. And if it's not a business book, it's a philosophy book, or now he's into, he's loving fiction for the first time, really. And so he's kind of all over the map. And, we'll go to Barnes and Noble, and there'll be a stack about, this high. I'll go, is that okay? And I go, you want me to say no to your reading? No, it's like, I'll go into debt to keep your mind, growing, and to, keep you going. So we've been having a lot of fun. We're starting to build a company together, and he's just so high functioning. It's really been fun. And with Aiden, here's, it's kind of the win, right? We count our wins. I have a little thing on the top of the stairway there that my wife's best friend gave us. And I always say, we count our wins. We just count our wins. We count every one of our wins, every one. We don't let one by, we count our wins. And so my son was, he came up to me and he goes, Dad, this is senior year in high school. And, they're getting into things, at that age where now things are coming on, they're being. So I handle everything, very directly. And I go, this is good. This is not. This is, this will be all right. This will not be okay. This will bless you. This will definitely set you back. So here's your lane, right? And he comes to me and he goes, I got to talk to you about spring break. And I'm thinking, does he want to go to Sodom or Gomorrah? It's like, where's he? But it's just, it's mischief, right? So I'm starting to think, okay, what's up? What do you want to do? And he goes, well, where do you want to go?
Wow.
And I was like, what?
Wow.
And he was just basically saying, I want to go, just you and me. I want to go somewhere and just hang out for spring break week. And I said, you pick the place and we'll make it happen. And we did. We went off, the two of us. We went down to the Caribbean, and it was so much fun, But it's like, that was a win. I mean, it was a huge win, He likes me enough to want to travel with me. He likes me enough to want to hang out with me. And it's just one of those things where I knew the day he was born that it wasn't about me anymore. And so, I've got him, I'm holding him. So his head's in here and his feet are right here. And I'm looking into eyes that I've never seen flesh of my own flesh before. And so I was like, this is powerful. I'm looking into my own eyes. This is like incredible. And then, I go back out on the road, and I'm skating in New York, in Madison Square Garden, and I'm skating to a Michael Feinstein song, and he's there singing it live for me. And it's like, man, I never would have dreamed that I could be experiencing these things. And at the same time, there was something inside, what am I doing here? And then the next night we're in Long Island, and I'm skating the same song. And the whole time I'm skating is, what am I doing here? So I went home, and that was my last show of the tour. I went home, and I went to the rink every day, and I skated like I was training for the Olympics. And I remember there was a day where every single jump I landed clean, perfect, and backflips were floating. Everything was absolutely perfect. And I packed up my car, and I'm headed through the little canyon on my way home. And it's like, I'm done.
Just like
I wanted to end on a great day, and it was a great day. And it was like, I'm not quitting necessarily because my skills have diminished so much that it's embarrassing to be in front of an audience. There were a lot of those performances towards the end, but I wanted to quit on my own terms. And so I stopped, and I was home, and I saw his first steps, and I heard his first words. And I know him as well as my wife. I figure after 20 years of touring, I earned it. I could be home now for a minute and just sort of life, just live life. I was so out of balance all those years that I was touring, and it just it's hard to sort of live in fantasy land and have balance in your life. It's just it. I was in my Bible study, and we were talking about this one scripture, and it's basically we all came to the conclusion that if you give somebody fame and or money, it will ignite the deepest, darkest part of their character. And it's not natural for people to have great wealth or great fame. And I was kind of like experiencing in my own world both. And I realized how toxic it was. And so, I got through cancer. And I remember it was one day I just said, I got a second chance. My mom didn't have a second chance. I have a second chance. And so I just living in Denver, I was, there for like 23 years. I just one day just loaded up my car and I just decided to start driving. It was almost like that Forrest Gump thing, and he just starts running. Oh, that was me. I was just sort of, I've got to figure out what's next because I was given a second chance at life. My mom wasn't. I was. I know that it's been the tail wagging the dog for all these years. And I got to figure out exactly what I want to do. And so I ended up, I decided to go to Tucson because I had a friend there that ran a golf resort. And I figured I could, just sort of get a great rate on a room and mooch off of him for a couple of weeks and figure it out. And I actually wrecked my car on the way into town, but I was able to get it into Tucson. But it was a disaster. I mean, the car was just totally munched. I avoided an animal crossing the road, and I instead of hitting the brake, I hit the gas pedal. And so I said, "Can you repair it?" And they said, "No. It's the body is too messed up, and it's just a disaster." I said, "Well, can you find me a replacement?" I said, "Yeah." So it was about 2 weeks later, they called me and they said, "We found a replacement and we're going to have it flat bedded in." And I said, "Oh, okay. How much is that going to cost?" And they said, "About $1,000." And it's like, "Ooh, where is it?" And they said, "It's in Los Angeles." And I said, "How much is a Southwest Airlines ticket from Tucson to Los Angeles?" And they said, $50. I said, "Well, maybe that's a better deal." So I flew into LA and I picked up the car and I had some friends there that said I could stay with them for a while. And then I found a little apartment to rent. And I never really wanted to live in LA because, if you go to the amusement park, there's always one of those rides where you have to be this tall in order to be on the ride, right? Well, I always felt like I was too short to live in Los Angeles. I was going to get swallowed whole if I lived in Los Angeles. I was like, I don't know if I want to live here. And so I realized that I had a great coach that I could work with. My choreographer was there. My costume designer was there. I could just get ready for that year's tour there. And so I did. And then kind of started back and forth to LA a little bit. And then I found a place that I liked a lot there. It's just a golf community that I really liked and found a house that I really liked. And I decided to go ahead and just plant there. And I did. And I'd just be there all summer and kind of like figure out and things and get ready for the tour. And then I'd be on the road. And it was on the third anniversary of my diagnosis. I'm in Memphis and we were fundraising for St. Jude, the Target House at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And Tony Thomas, Danny Thomas's son, had just gone through a really painful separation and divorce, and he had some guests coming to the show that night. And it's like, oh, Tony might be dating. This is interesting. This is good. So at the end of the show, there were all the families backstage, and who I thought was Tony's date was standing by the production office, just standing there by herself. So I'm going to go introduce myself and check out, my friend's, interest. And I met her and my heart started to jump a little bit. And I go, okay, that's not right. Because I've been off the grid for 3 years, just thinking that I'm just not whole to be in a relationship. And I meet this girl, and I felt something. I was like, oh, that's not. This is now I'm a creep because this is Tony's date, and it's like now, okay, nice to meet you, and I walked away. And a few months later, I'm in LA with Tony playing golf, and he's on the phone. He's like, okay, I talk to you later. And I go, is that the girl from Memphis? And he said, Tracy? And I go, I don't know what her name was. He goes, no. Tracy's like a friend. That like a no, that wasn't a date. She was just there as my guest. And I go, oh. And he goes, did you like her? I said, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And he goes, well, I think she's moving to LA this week. I'll see if I can get her phone number. So a few weeks later, I'm traveling a little bit. I get back, connect with Tracy. We go out on our first date, and we've been together ever since.
Wow.
25 years we've been
Wow.
together. And she she just, man, she pulled me out of
Hmm.
the worst, I mean, it was just it was always the tail wagging the dog with me. And we were dating, and she just said, I need to ask you a question. And it's important. I mean, I really like where everything's going. I'm not interested in going out with anyone else. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good. And she said, but I need to know where you are in your relationship with Jesus Christ. And no one's ever asked me that before. And my faith was different because I believed in God. I didn't really know much about Jesus, but I believed in God. And I'd pray, and I'd always ask for his help. But I didn't know much about Jesus. And I said what any smart guy would say. I just said, well, where do you want me to be? So my faith journey began. She introduced me to her pastor, and he ended up marrying us and baptizing me. And that whole faith journey thing has answered so many questions that I've had over the years. I just started connecting the dots, and I could see the bigger picture. And yeah, now as a family, we're all in, and it's been really powerful to just sort of release so much of what the world is imposing on us and sort of look up and believe in something greater. It's the world is a frenetic, chaotic. It can be amazing, or it can be really debilitating, and when you look at, sort of where our culture is in the United States is divided, very, very polarized. It's like, well, I'm going to love everybody, and I'm just going to love everybody, and I'm going to serve everybody. I don't, where people want to put their views in politics and everything else, that's up to them. I respect that. They can do that. I'm just going to love them and live my life, and serve them through my, work in cancer, and try to save lives, and try to be a good citizen, show up places, and try to help people. And in that, I think I'm living a, sort of a quality, organic life where, I don't really feel like I need to be in the fight unless they're going up against my Lord and Savior. Then we might have some, just disagreements, but I'll still try to win them over.
Let's go back to 1984. There's not every day that you get a chance to talk to a gold medalist. And I'm so curious to ask you, what is the greatest lesson, Scott, you learned from winning a gold medal?
Well, it's preparation. It's preparation. It's dedication. It's knowing, sort of being responsible to your path. That year was extraordinary. I mean, all of them were. When I made the Olympic team in 1980, that was something my mom always thought, you're gonna, someday we're gonna go to the Olympics. And it's like, I'm coming in last every year at nationals. What do you base this on? And for her, it was just, that's, she saw that, she saw it. And so when I was on the 80 Olympic team, I was like, wow, this is extraordinary. Because when my mom died, I decided I wanted to honor her every day in my training, every day in my everything. And so I did. If, oh, I don't really want to do that. Honor your mom. Okay, I'm going to be there on time. I don't really want to do long program run throughs in the summer because it's altitude, it's hot, and it's high. Honor her. Okay, I'll do long program run throughs. So by honoring my mom, I was better prepared. I was better equipped. I was stronger. I had the run throughs in. I wasn't thinking about things, right? So I made it to the 80 Olympics, came in fifth, went to the Worlds after, came in fifth. And then about a month later, I realized that the top three guys had all retired from competitive skating. And I was ranked second in the world. And I go, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? How do I get to number one? And there was a part of my job that I didn't like very much. It was the compulsory figures. And so I didn't like them and they didn't like me back. And I always try to encourage people, if it's a part of your job you don't like, master it. Just master it. Just fall in love with it, master it, and then you won't hate it anymore, and I won't hate you back. Just get in there and fix the relationship. And so once I started fixing my relationship with figures, I was better positioned to win. So starting in October of 1980 to March of 1984, I went undefeated, which is pretty good for a guy that comes in last all the time, right? And so going into 84, I realized, I hadn't lost a competition in 3 years. I'm going into the Olympic season. I've got to be aggressive. I've got to dig a little deeper. And so I go, what's my mindset? Well, my mindset is I've got to eliminate every would have, could have, and should have. So when I step on the ice in Sarajevo and I do my run through my long program to hopefully get on the podium, wherever it's going to be, hopefully on top, that I've got to be able to accept whatever I present on that night. And so I did. I eliminated I wasn't going to step on the ice and say, man, I should have worked harder, or I could have shown up more. Man, if I only would have done my run throughs earlier in the year, I would have, could have, should have. If I just take the would have, could have, should have, and just eliminate them, then I can accept whatever happens. And in that, I was able to more or less step on the ice in faith that I can do it with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. The one thing I've learned about open hand versus clenched fist is if you have an open hand, you're allowing things to happen, right? And somebody said, if you were to hold love in your hand like it were sand, an open hand is a really good way to do it because you can stack it higher and everything else. And what I learned about kind of all that is if you do live life with a clenched fist, like expectation, and you're living life in a way that you feel like you deserve, or if it's all done like this, there's no room in there for anything. There's no room in there for anything. Where here things can come and go, and you can relax, and you can just allow things to happen with integrity, right? So stepping on the ice of the Olympics, I just say, I'll just take whatever I get. And I didn't skate my best that night, but because I repaired my relationship with the figures, I was so far ahead of everybody that no one could catch me. No one. And so I had a lead going into the long program, and I could make mistakes in my long, and I did. And it's really funny how important those mistakes were to my next, because they put little chips on my shoulder. It's like, did I really deserve to be the Olympic champion? Well, what's next? Pro career. Well, if I'm going to do a pro career, I'm going to be the best one ever, right? So I went in with a hunger and an attitude, and almost like, if anybody doesn't think that I deserve to win the Olympics, right, I'm going to prove to them that I was the right person to do so. And so over the next years, I learned and I grew, and I figured out how to be a professional entertainer skater. I competed at the World Pro Championships, usually pretty well. I use that as a commercial more than I used it as I didn't need to win. I just needed to win the audience, right? Because that's all I cared about was being, my role models back then were Bruce Springsteen for his, blue collar mentality of just going out and throwing it down. I love that about him. Neil Diamond, because if you ever see Neil Diamond in concert, you see the joy. He loves being on stage. He loves it. And it's contagious, and you just can't wait to go back. And then there was Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. I always loved Led Zeppelin, but when he became a solo artist, I was really blown away by how he wasn't afraid to take risks and try new things and put himself in different situations with different rhythms and different things. And I go, I want to be brave like that. So work hard, show the joy, and just don't be afraid to take chances. And I stepped into this pro career, and I was able to build a show called Stars on Ice, and it saw me through to the end, and it's still going on to this day. I mean, it's just like now, I guess it's coming up on 39 years of Stars on, or almost 40, coming up on 40 years of Stars on Ice. And it's really remarkable, the people that have been blessed by that opportunity and know more than me, but again, it's just learning, growing, stepping into things with intention and with, sort of a hunger you just want to be, you want to answer the call, and you want to do it well. And if you fail, learn from it, and that's the whole thing is, one thing I learned, and it's in, one of the books that you said you read before we had this interview. It's like, one thing I learned is it's so easy for us as human beings to take our failures and put them in a bag and then carry them around with us. And the more we fail, the heavier the bag gets. And the more we just, are constantly. And it's, you get to a point where if you truly understand that failure is information only, and you can cut yourself some slack by just saying, I blew it, I made a mistake, but I'm not that person anymore. I've learned from it. I'm not going to do that again. Then you can just drop the bag, and then life gets a lot lighter and a lot easier. And the old John Wooden, Coach Wooden from UCLA, he said, my teams never lose ever. It's like, well, I've seen your record. There's some numbers in the loss column. And he goes, no. Either they win or they learn. There is no lose. They win or learn. And it's like, I love that. And that's kind of where that mentality comes from. If you make mistakes, if you make bad choices, if you blow it, learn and understand that, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Now you can go this way, and you're not stuck back there. And for so long, man, I carried that bag, and I just, at times it put some strategic chips on my shoulder, which I could use to get to the next, but it's not a healthy way to live. The healthiest way to live is to say, okay, if there's someone I need forgiveness from, try to get it. And if there's someone I need to forgive, extend it immediately, and now you can live lighter and more efficiently and healthier and better. And, just cut yourself some slack, because we're just human beings, and we're knuckleheads, and we do stuff, and it's just, next, let's learn and grow.
Back in the 80s and 90s, Scott, there was a bull rider named Richard Hedeman. Have you heard of this man before?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Richard, he's well known for the name Tough Hedeman is what everybody called him. And when the reason
Yeah.
they called him Tough Hedeman is because at one point in his career, he got stepped on by a bull right in the face and had to have 13-hour reconstructive surgery that included 300 stitches. And 5 months later, he was back to bull riding. So everybody called
Yeah.
this guy Tough because he was tough as nails. And he won 4 world championships and is in the Hall of Fame now. And after one of his world championships, if you know anything about the rodeo crew, they like their drinks, if you will. So they're always at the honky tonks, they're always at the bars. They like to party, they like to celebrate. And so after one of his wins, everybody's around him. I mean, they want to put him up on their shoulders and make this thing a big deal. And they said, Tough, where are we going to find you tonight? Like, what honky tonk are you going to be at? What are you going to do next? Kind of like when they asked the winning quarterback after the Super Bowl, like, are you going to
Yeah.
Disneyland? Kind of that same thing. And
Yeah.
he goes, no, I'm not going out. I'm packing my bags and I'm moving to the next city. And they go, what? And he goes, the bull don't care. The bull doesn't care what I
Yeah.
did tonight. Next
Yeah.
week, when I got to get back in the saddle, the next bull doesn't care what I just did here. And so it's
Yeah.
this mentality, Scott. It's super sticky because, like, hey, no matter what happens, I win a gold medal.
Mm.
The next competition doesn't care. I won 3 world championships in a row, 81, 82, 83. It doesn't matter. But what reminded me of that story, Scott, is hearing you after you won your gold medal. You ended up stashing this thing in your sock drawer for a couple of years, and then now I'm looking behind you. Got a
Mm.
beautiful office here, and I don't see any medals or trophies, and you're a guy that's decorated with them. So I want to to take this lesson of the bull doesn't care and moving on to kind
Yeah.
of the next thing in life and tying it with kind of your thoughts on trophies and medals and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're important. I think, you got to strive for something. You want the recognition of, it's always great to feel that, I did it. It's always, and again, the gold medal at the Olympics is kind of the pinnacle of figure skating as, the prize. That's the prize you want to win. And that's, you're part of history, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I won, I trained in relative isolation. It was just me and the ice. My coach would chime in, but it was just me and the ice. Right. So I'm on my way to Sarajevo, but we're stopping in Paris to get used to the time change so that when I'm in Sarajevo, I'm completely locked in, ready to go and ready to present myself to judges for the time leading up to the competition. So I'm in Chicago Air and I'm reading a book and didn't have a watch. There's a bit of a layover. And I was reading for a while and I got really scared that maybe I lost track of time. So the gentleman was walking by and I go, "Excuse me, sir, what time is it?" And he looked at me like, "Leave me alone." And he kept going. And it's like, I'm going to the Olympic Games representing the United States and I can't get the time of day from somebody on the way to the Olympics. Well, we came back through Chicago after I won, and there was a bunch of kids coming back from a Washington field trip. And I stood there for 2.5 hours and signed autographs. And I was like, that's how much my life had changed, right? So a gentleman from Denver sent a private plane to pick me up in Chicago to bring me back to Denver, where there was a parade waiting for me, a parade down and through all the way into downtown Larimer Square. And Larimer Square was full. 5,000 plus people were there to, celebrate this victory. My favorite jazz band was performing on the stage. The mayor was there, the governor's wife. It was this big deal, right? And then we went to the comedy club afterwards, and it was just a great celebration. And the next day, I got invited to the governor's office. And I thought, oh, this is a big deal. A little, photo op. I love his wife. She's a cancer survivor. My mom had breast cancer, didn't survive. She did. It's kind of like wonderful thing. Nice lady, nice people. I always liked the governor, Governor Lamb. So he invited me into his office, and I got there and I thought it was a photo op, and he just sort of closed the door behind me, and it was just me and him. And he said, I'm sorry I couldn't be at the parade. I had another commitment. I'm really sorry, but my wife said, "You're a nice young man." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Have you ever heard of the hometown hero syndrome?" And I said, "Hometown hero syndrome?" I go, "No." And he goes, "Well, that's when sort of the quarterback of the high school football team throws a bomb at the end of the state championship game to win the state championship, and everybody carries him off the field on their shoulders, and he just feels like his whole life is going to be just like that, and it's not." He goes, "You seem like a nice young man." He said, "I just want you to enjoy the fruits of your labor, but I want you to understand that it's not going to always be like this." And I was taken aback, and I was like, that's really generous. That is so kind. Now, I was scheduled, I think it was either that night or the next night, to speak at the Paralympic banquet because all the Paralympic athletes were coming back from Sarajevo. And my orthopedic surgeon, who I couldn't pay, said, "If you'll do me this one favor, don't worry about the bill." I said, "Thank you." So I said, "I'll speak at it." So he goes, wear your Olympic uniform and bring your medal. And so I did. I came in wearing my Olympic jacket and tie and all the stuff they give all the Olympic teams. And I walk into this banquet and I see all these people, some without legs, some were blind, it was just, and they were all wearing the same medal as me. And it offended me that I thought that I did anything, because all I did was able-bodied, go to Olympic Games, but what they did was they had to rise above so much more to be able to defeat a mountain going down, 80 miles an hour on one leg, or in a sled. And I was so offended that I knew there was something about the medal I wasn't comfortable with. So I put it in a brown paper bag, and it lived in my sock drawer, my underwear drawer. And it offended me. I just didn't want it. I didn't want to look at it. Because I knew I'd heard the stories that so many Olympic athletes get stuck. Like they would go to a restaurant, "Don't you know who I am?" That type of thing, And they almost felt like because they did this thing with and for their country that somehow they were owed something, right? And all I really wanted to do was skate. I didn't want to worry about that stuff. I'm going this way. I'm not getting, so as much as you can anchor your identity in professional world based on your accomplishments, I could anchor my whole identity on winning an Olympic gold medal. Or an anchor prevents you from moving, from sailing, right? And I saw it more as that kind of anchor than the other kind of anchor. And seeing these these amazing people, these Paralympic athletes, and the joy they had, and just I was blown away. That medal lived in that drawer for 8 years until I was inducted into the World Figure Skating Hall of Fame. And they said, "Do you want to leave anything in the museum on display?" And I said, "Everything." And they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Will you please just take everything I've ever won, going back to my very first silver medal in 1968, all of it. I want you to have it all gone. It's all yours." And they said, "Sure." And so they took everything. And it's like two things. One, for my kids, if they want to see it, it's being taken care of. It's not rotting in a drawer or something. And the other thing is they don't have to, like, that's not my identity to them. My identity to my family isn't, I'm an Olympic gold medalist. That's a part of their, the pride they take in me is that their dad did something cool, but that's not my identity. My identity isn't living in the past and doing all these things. It really is just being present for them and allowing them to know that all that stuff exists, but it's not a part of our day to day. And in my faith journey, I realized that it could have become an idol. And idols separate you from all good things. You so focus on this one thing that the rest of the world goes away. And I really wanted that to go away so I could look at the rest of the world. And it allowed for me to be free and hungry and ambitious. And again, those little chips on my shoulder, they weren't like a cornerstone. They were, chips. And I, one at a time, kind of had to prove myself that I was the right one to win on the night. And that I was able to create entities that made a lot of skaters' careers last longer than they probably would have. And, some of them became very wealthy. So, I think I did the best I could.
You've had some challenges and some opportunities with some health diagnoses throughout the last kind of 2 decades here. I know
Yeah.
it's impossible. It's impossible to go through them all, even an entire podcast, let alone kind of the back half here. But if you could let my listeners just in on what that's been like, what some of the lessons you've learned, and even if they haven't had the same experience, Scott, what can we learn from you going through some of the things that you've gone through on the health side of
Oh
things?
man, this is the mic drop. Okay. So right after my son Aiden was born, he's 14 months old. I'm going to this this benefit we do in Cleveland, where it's, I help produce the show, I help direct the show, I help, cast it. I do all this stuff, right? So I was feeling kind of off, and I decided that I'm going to be in there I'll fly in on Thursday. I'll make an appointment on Friday. My family gets in on Friday, and then the show's on Saturday. So I go into my doctor who treated me for my cancer, and I just said, "Hey, I'm feeling a little symptomatic here, and I'm not sure what's going on. And what are symptoms? My vision's changed." And he goes, "Well, you're in your 40s now. It happens." Blah, blah, blah. Well, I feel like I'm off, and I did some blood work, and I have no testosterone at all. And he goes, "Well, it's probably from the chemo and long-term effect, and we could treat you with that. It's not a big problem. Just give you some ointments, and you'll be fine." Now, I'm not satisfied with that. And he goes, "Why?" And I go, "Because it's not just my vision, it's my peripheral vision." He goes, "Oh, let's get you in for a head scan." So I went in for the head scan, and I'm walking out of the MRI room, and the physician says, "There's something in there. Your doctor will meet you back at your appointment room." And I said, "Well, you'd be the first one to say there's something in there. That's for sure. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer." And I realized that I have a brain tumor. That's not. What? No, I did the health stuff. I did cancer. I did chemo. I did it all. I don't need to be doing another thing 7 years later. It's not fair. I paid my dues. I get to live healthy for a while. And so they didn't know what kind of tumor it was. And he said, we're going to have to figure this thing out. And then my wife was arriving that day, and I went back to the hotel, and she was arriving. She goes, what's going on? I go, I'll tell you upstairs. And so we get upstairs, and Aiden's on the floor, and we put the phone next to him, and he's like banging the phone on the cradle, and he's playing with it and having fun. And she said, what's going on? And there was no other way. I said, I have a brain tumor. And she just grabbed both my hands and she started to pray. And it was the single most powerful moment in my life. And I've had a lot of big moments in my life, but that was the most powerful. So we just said, okay, it is what it is, whatever it takes. And so I stayed in Cleveland after the performance. And then after a week, they said, we have to go in for a biopsy. So there's a little scar right there. I went in, took a piece of it, came back out. They said you could lose speech, motor function, the ability to, remember things, And so I woke up and I knew it's 10:20. I know who I was, where I was, why I was there. And I went, yes. Oh, I can speak. Okay, this is good. It went well. Yay. And they came in smiling. The doctor came in smiling and he goes, it went really well. We know what it is. And Tracy came in and she goes, how are you doing? I go, great. She goes, we know what it is. And there's options. I go, great. And so they handed my wife a piece of paper. And it was the name of the brain tumor was a craniopharyngioma. It's a pituitary brain tumor. And so she's reading about it and she goes, oh my goodness, listen to this. Craniopharyngiomas are usually detected early in a child's life due to a lack of growth and development.
There it is.
I was born with that brain tumor,
Wow.
but they didn't have the technology to be able to diagnose it back then. And that, for whatever reason, all those years I skated, it stopped doing its mischief. And I guess if I can leave anything with your viewers, listeners, anything else, it's not all the bad things that happen in our life are meant to be bad things. This brain tumor that I was born with stopped me from growing and put me in hospitals for 4 years. It also put me on the ice, and it allowed me to be a size and a strength that allowed me to take my skating to places I never even thought to dream. Cancer interrupted my path of living my life sort of horribly in a way, and really well in other ways, right? But ultimately, I wasn't living life I was supposed to be living. And it put me on another path. It allowed me to be grateful for the life that I had. And now I could look at doing other things better. Here's my second chance. So whatever's going on in people's lives right now, and there's always something going on. Respect it for what it can do, not for what it's going to do to you. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So when I learned that I had this brain tumor, and it's been a bit of a mischief maker, they did, gamma knife radiation in my head, and I lost a lot of hormonal function. So I've been on replacement ever since, and it fluctuates, it kind of, and then it came back 6 years later, and they did surgery up through my nose to take it out and hit an artery, and it became something else, and an aneurysm, and 9 more surgeries. And then 6 years later, it came back. And when it came back the second time, I guess it would be my third brain tumor, 1, 2, 3. In the back of my head, all I heard was get strong. I was like, what? It's like, get strong. And they're giving me a surgical option. It's not going to be easy because you already had the surgery. It didn't go well, but we figure that we can get it out. Okay. Next doctor comes in and goes, there's a brand new targeted therapy that will shrink it. It's a chemo, but it's targeted, and it'll shrink your tumor, and it won't get rid of it, but it'll shrink it. So at least, and he goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I think I'm going to go home and get strong. And they go, what does that mean? I go, I have no idea. And so I just went home and had to figure out if I was supposed to get strong, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And I was reading the Bible one day, and it said, love the Lord with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your strength, and all of your soul. And it was like, And so I did that. And I went back for a scan 3 months later, and it hadn't grown. Jeez. I went back 3 months later, and it shrank 45%.
Oh my!
I went back 3 months later, and it shrank another 25%. So I guess what I'm just trying, it's like listen to not only what your brain is going to tell you a lot of things, right? But listen to what's happening inside of you, and just be calm, take all the information and act upon that. And when you do, you'll find that you're going to make decisions based on what's best for you. And in that, I've been able to kind of rise above this thing. It'll be in January, it'll be 10 years since that diagnosis, and I haven't touched it. I don't even look at it anymore. It doesn't have any power, any authority. It did its good, it did its damage, but ultimately it did its good. And that's where we have to go through these periods of our lives. We have to allow them to do their good, you know? And people go, well, you're a man of faith. How could God do this? It's like, well, it's not always a bad thing. You know, it's like, we have to just look at it for where it puts us or where it can put us. Because, you know, we're all knuckleheads, you know, we're all going to do crazy stuff, but it's in the forgiveness of that. And it's in the stepping forward, going this way, and understanding that if we look at bad things that happen to us as opportunities for growth and opportunities for perspective, they're blessings.
It's awesome. The
And
last one.
we're only here for a minute, you know, right there is is it right? No, it's right there, is an hourglass. And it reminds me that all we have is sand, and all we want is more sand. Yep, there it is. Just give me more sand, baby. All I want is more sand. I know that my body is really fragile. It's really can be resilient, but it's ultimately temporary. Just give me more sand and allow me to win the race. At the end of the day, I just want to win. I just want to look back on my life and say, yeah, I did a lot of really crazy, stupid things, but I was able to do some good things too. And if I can leave on a high note, you know, it's like I always tell people, you get to the fork in the road, take it, you know. But the fork in the road isn't this, it's this, right? It's not up left or right, it's an up or down. And you can choose to go down. That's a really easy choice. There's a lot of momentum there. It'll take you lower than you've ever been. You can just stay right at the fork and just adapt, and you know, nobody's going to blame you for that. But if you start to climb, man, your life gets a lot better. And the view is so much greater just by doing the work to go higher, higher and higher and higher. So I guess that's where I want to leave it. If you're okay with that, you know, it's just allow the tribulations in your life to do the work to strengthen you and to give you the strong perspective of, you know, our days are our days and we're going to live them well and right. And whatever comes across our path, allow it to do its work, and it'll put you in a better place.
And perhaps my favorite quote of yours, the only disability is a bad attitude.
Yeah.
The only disability is a bad attitude.
You ask those Paralympic athletes, ask them. They're going to say, no, I woke up and I wanted to do more. I wanted to challenge. I wanted to rise above this. And I think we all have something to rise above. All of us. You know, we're given that, as Paul would call it, a thorn. You know, we're given that thorn. And that's something that, you know, we feel like pulls us off our path or weakens us or whatever it does. But we just got to look at it and say, okay, it is what it is. And I'm going to rise above this thing, and I'm going to be better than I've ever been, stronger than I've ever been, more alive and awake than I've ever been. And in that, that's living life in the best way you possibly can.
I love it. Scott, you're such a heartwarming spirit, man. I can feel it from screen to screen here. So thank you for your time and thank you for your presence. How can my listeners best support you?
Well, I got scottcares.org. You know, it's my Cancer Alliance for Research, Education, Survivorship. It's a foundation I created out of my own survivorship. But we fund immunotherapy research. We just are trying to change the way people are treated for cancer forever. And in that, I've learned that in the very near future, and I've heard this from one of the greatest research scientists in cancer, due to what's being developed now with immunotherapy, targeted therapies, all the new therapies, there is a day coming in the very near future where no one dies of cancer. And so that's what I'm working towards. scottcares.org. The 1984 campaign is you can join CARES for $19.84 a month, and you can help us cure cancer. We've already funded 110 research programs, either by ourselves or in partnership with somebody else. and we're not afraid to go after the big bad nasty bullies. We're in research for glioblastoma brain cancer. We're in research for colorectal cancers, which can be very deadly once they get to a certain point. We're pituitary, pancreatic. We're doing a lot of work, and we're a very small foundation that is very collaborative, and we've done some really cool things in the past. But join us at scottcares.org and really help us reach our goals of making sure that no one ever has to die from cancer, and that their own bodies hold the keys to detecting and destroying the cancer without all these chemo drugs and everything that I had to endure. I want to see cancer way different in the next 20 years than it's been for the last 50. And in that, I think I honor my mom's life, and I honor my survivorship in a really cool way of being able to bring people together. November 23rd, we're at Bridgestone Arena. Too many tickets are available. Come out and rock and roll. We've got live music and rock and roll artists, the iconic artists of the 70s and 80s, skating to Olympic champion playing for Olympic champion skaters. It's sensory overload. There's nothing like it in the world. Come help us. We're here to help us help you, and we're just trying to inspire hope, and it's been a miraculous journey that I was a fundraiser after I lost my mom, and I became an activist after I survived. And just join me. Climb aboard this train. We're gonna change the world forever and for the better.
Awesome. Scott, thanks for your time, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, God bless you. Thank you.